Welcome back, guys. So in this video, we'll focus on the large language models. So in the last video, we have talked about what is generative AI, what is agentic AI, right? So in this video, we'll just start with understanding what are LLMs and how do we work with LLMs, types of LLMs, and so on. So first thing, LLMs. Already I just gave a basic introduction about LLMs in the last session, right? So what are LLMs? They are called as large language models. And already I told you why they are called as large, right? Because for one reason is it has billions of parameters, right? Which the model learns to ultimately do the generation of content or doing some kind of task for us. And it is required lot of data to train because these LLMs are trained with large number of data, huge data, like you can say the TVs, million petabytes, like huge petabytes of data, very huge data. Okay, so entire lot of data, right? So that is again very large, and it requires a very large or very huge computation power to host these models or use these models. You need a very huge computation power. So that is where we say it as large, very huge models. Okay. So, and again, language, as I told you already, these are the text-based models ultimately, right? These are basically the text-based models. That is what we understood in the last session. So now we'll go deeper and we'll understand generally the different types of LLMs we are having. So when I say the types of LLMs, what do I mean by this is types of LLMs based on their availability. Okay, right? Like how they are available for us, how can we use that? Okay. So generally we can classify these types of LLMs into two types. Okay. One is the closed sourced LLMs, and the open source LLMs. So coming to the closed sourced LLMs, these are the types of LLMs where, as the name says, closed sourced means they are proprietary to a specific company. Like for example, OpenAI's GPT. Okay, so these are closed sourced. The architecture of this LLMs are basically closed sourced. Means it is not publicly available publicly available. Okay. So it means others cannot see this architecture. This is proprietary. This is IP of the company, right? It is IP of the LLM provider. LLM provider. So then how can we use this LLMs in the sense through APIs, right? Through APIs or SDK, right? Through the APIs or SDK. So what happens in this scenario is, say for example, the examples of this closed source LLMs are nothing but the Chat GPT, so GPT. It could be GPT models like GPT 4.1, GPT 3, GPT 4, GPT 5. So these models are basically the closed source models. Now, for example, these models you cannot download these models and use it, or you cannot see the architecture because it is proprietary of the OpenAI. Here, the OpenAI is the LLM provider here. So if you want to use these models, you have to use the OpenAI API. Okay. Or you can say another example is Anthropic Claude models, right? It could be Sonnet 4.5, Claude Sonnet 4, or 3.5, anything. All the Claude models, or Google's Gemini, right? Google's Gemini, or maybe it could be, XAI's Grok. So these models are basically the closed source models where the LLM provider will be hosting the models in their own server. So these models will be in their own server, the LLM provider servers. Okay, it will be in their own servers. So you are just using it through the API or SDK. Okay, and in this case, what happens is you have to pay per use. You have to pay the LLM provider per tokens. We can say tokens. So what is tokens? Again, I'll talk about that soon. But here we have to pay accordingly, like how many times we are using it, how many tokens we are using it. Accordingly, we have to pay the respective LLM provider. Okay. So we have to purchase, we have to add credits and go on using it. Okay. And the advantage of this closed source models are you don't need to worry about, okay, don't need to worry about the server or server maintenance or the, the compute maintenance or any kind of model maintenance. Everything will be taken care by the LLM provider. So LLM provider will manage the compute, right? Your LLM provider will manage the compute. Your job is to just use the API and basically access the state of our models. That is the second advantage, right? With very minimal cost, we can access the state of art models. Okay, so that is again, another reason why closed source models are advantage. But one disadvantage is if you are having any kind of data which is private, and you don't want to expose to the internet, or if you don't want that data, if you're, for example, if you're working in the enterprise or banking industry, you might have a data where you don't want to expose it outside to any of the company. So that is where this closed source models will be having some issues, because even though you take an enterprise level of subscription of this particular provider, still your data is out of your network, right? So that is where the data privacy concerns. Basically, the problem is, your data is exposed again outside, so we don't know what happens. That is one disadvantage of this. Okay, so that is the basic idea of how closed source model works. Okay, and the second type is open source models. These are the models where the architecture of these models is open source, as the name says. Open source means you can download this model. You can basically download this model right from the internet. These models are available everywhere in the internet, or specific places. You can fine tune them if you want. You can also optimize them, fine tune them according to your own requirement. You can host it in your own server, okay, offline. You can host it in your own server, okay, and use it. Okay, so that is the idea of this. So obviously, in this case, there is data privacy is you're having a data privacy, right? You're having data privacy here. That is advantage here. So your data will be in your network because you're hosting in your own server and you're using it. But the main problem here is you have to maintain the GPUs, or you have to maintain the respective compute here. Here the main problem is, yeah. So here we have to maintain the maintain maintain your compute, right? So again, here the problem, one more problem is, see, these models have the parameters, right? These are called as large language models. So depending upon the number of parameter model you are hosting or using, your compute also increases. For example, if you are hosting a 1 billion parameter, you might need at least 1 GB to 2 GB of VRAM, that is the GPU RAM, because these models works in GPUs rather than CPUs, because CPUs are very slow in this kind of models. You have to use GPU level compute. Okay. Again, this 1 GB, 2 GB, I'm just giving a vague number. Again, it depends upon what kind of optimized model you're using, because there are a lot of optimization we'll be doing for the model, like it could be quantization, or it could be any kind of pruning or something like that. But ultimately, if you're using a quantized models, or if you're using optimized models, maybe up to 1 to 2 GB, sometimes it might be more. In the same way, for example, if you want to host a 7 billion parameter model, you need to at least have 8 to 9 GB of VRAM, GPU RAM. Again, it's GPU RAM, right? Right? So imagine if you want to host 13 billion parameter, you at least need a 12 GB to 12 GB to 16 GB, or we can say 14 GB of VRAM. So like this, these are again optimized model I'm talking about, not the raw models. Like that, you can just go on and check, like how much for how many billion parameter model, how much VRAM you need. So you can see, right? for hosting this model, again, here I'm only talking about the hosting the model, not like fine tuning or something. Again, fine, if you talk about fine tuning, the size will again drastically increase, depends upon what type of fine tuning you're following. But I'm just talking about just hosting and just loading it for inferencing purpose, just loading and inferencing it just for, getting the content, just generating the content by the open source model. You need this much of VRAM. So you can see, right, the moment to start increasing the parameters, you need to spend more amount or more, you have to spend cost on in terms of maintenance of this particular server, and you have to purchase this kind of GPUs. Okay. So that is where the main problem occurs. So you have to maintain this. And if you see these models, which in the closed source models, we are able to access 600 billion, 700 billion with an API, which is an API call without maintaining any compute. But here, if you want to access that huge model, you need a very large compute. So that is a main issue in the drawback in the open source case, where you have to, when you are hosting by yourself. Again, in the open source also, there are few cases where you can use you can use the models hosted by someone else. But here again, I'm talking about if you're hosting by yourself, you're actually loading in your own compute in your own network. That is where this fun. So that is a main problem. Here you can access the state of art models in a very lower cost, but here you have to spend a bit higher in order to use open source models. But again, if you're having a data privacy issue, if you're having a data privacy issue, you can go with open source models and use it. Okay. And examples are, there are a lot of examples, many, there are a lot of many, open source models came into the market. For examples, Meta's Llama models, right? All the Llama series, like it could be Llama 1, Llama 2, Llama 3, Llama 4 models, or it could be Microsoft Pi 3 versions, Microsoft Pi 3 models, Pi versions, Pi 1, Pi 2, Pi 3 models, or it could be Mistral AI models, or it could be Falcon models. So there are a lot of n number of open source LLMs, which you can actually use and host it by yourself, depending upon your compute power. Okay, and these models basically are available in many frameworks. So we'll be working on these frameworks. Like for example, there is a framework called as Olama. It's actually a package through which you can download the model and use it. There is one hub actually called as Hugging Face. Okay, so where you can actually see a lot of models and you can use this open source models there. And there is VLLM through which you can host the Hugging Face model. So they are like that. We'll be talking about various frameworks and the apps where you can actually work with open source models. So in this way, depending upon your requirement, you can either go for a closed source LLMs or the open source LLMs. So let me show a small sneak peek of what we have discussed, and also I'll just show you how the Olama looks. A sample example here. If you just search for Olama in the Google, you'll be able to see the first website, the olama.com, where you'll be able to see the Olama's official website. And if you just go to the models here, if you just go to the models, you'll be able to see the lot of, open source models by different. For example, this is GPT OSS by OpenAI. GPT OSS is the open source model by OpenAI itself. Quen by, Alibaba, and DeepSeek, uh, again the Gemma models by Google. So these are the various open source models available which you can download and use it. And you can also see the tags, right? These tags like 20B, 120B, which is nothing but the number of parameters. And what these can do, like this GPT OSS can work with tools, thinking, cloud. So you can see a lot of parameter model. You can see starting from 2 billion, you're having up to 235 billion parameter as well. So these are the examples of open source. In the same way, if you just go to Hugging Face, you'll be able to see different similar way you can see different types of LLM models. So you can just go to the Hugging Face and you can explore models here, and you can see a lot of different open source models here, right? Yeah, you can see these are the different open source LLMs. So like that, these are the the hubs where you can actually find out the open source models and use it. Okay. So just let's do a simple overview on whatever we have learned till now, and then in the next video we will actually go deeper, and we'll actually do some use case on the LLMs right now. We'll start with closed source, guys. First, we'll start with closed source. We'll start with using APIs. So we'll start with using OpenAI API, we'll start with Anthropic API and Google API, and we'll try to integrate into our code. And then I'll also explain you how to work with open source as well. Okay. So just let's do a small overview on what we discussed till now. So here I also want to introduce about a tool actually by Google. It's an AI based tool, which which might be helpful for you, which is basically called as Notebook LM. Okay. Basically, this tool, just I would recommend you to try out this tool. I will be giving some recommendations like this eventually. This tool will be helping us to, load your PDF or video or any audio or any kind of content. And what it can do is you can actually create a notebook, and here it can do a lot of things. Like it can convert your a PDF or a video into an audio or a video or a mind map or a report. Eventually, the infographic and slide, you can also create PPT out of this. This is just an AI tool. I just want to introduce you. Now, why I'm introducing this tool? Because here I just want to show a mind map which I've created for LLMs for whatever we have just discussed. So I just uploaded a simple PDF which I'm having for LLMs, and it has created a mind map. So let me show you how it looks. So here, if you just click on the mind map here, you will be seeing this. It is generating a mind map. You can also see the mind map which is generated earlier. So if I just open one mind map, okay, this was the AI generated mind map from the PDF which I gave. And this is just what we have discussed. Okay, just you can see how it looks. So here we talked about large language models, and we talked about what are LLMs, right? LLMs are basically these sophisticated transformer-based neural networks, and which understand, generate, and manipulate human language, right? And these are foundation of modern NLP systems. And what are the applications? These are the different applications, right, for the LLMs. And why these are called as large? Why large? Again, we just discussed, right? Because of the billions of parameters, large model size, and it requires high computation power, high VRAM, high processing power, right? So this is what we just discussed, and also the evolution example, like we started with GPT-3, and it was these are the first example, and then we have also just discussed about types of LLMs like closed sourced and open sourced. So what are closed sourced? These are the types of LLMs where architecture is closed, accessed via API, basically hosted by the companies like OpenAI and Google. Model architecture or training data is not disclosed, so it is like a closed sourced one. And the advantages of closed sourced, right? The advantages of closed sourced, right? No infrastructure needed because the model LLM provider will take care of it. You'll be able to access massive data for models, right? With minimal risk. Like these kind of models, you'll be able to access this many parameter. This huge parameter will be able to access with minimal cost. Simple integration, just an API, and it can also handle complex tasks, right? Because you are working with large models. And what are the disadvantages of the closed source model? Basically, you'll have the data privacy concerns, and also you sometimes it is costly whenever you are using deeply heavily. It is costly because closed source, open source are one-time setup, right? Once you set up it, that is a one-time setup cost. But here, if you're using it heavily, again, it will be lost the cost and lack of control. And also, you cannot do fine tuning there, correct? In open source, you can do fine tuning, but in the closed source, we have to wait for the LLM provider to do the fine tuning. Or if you want to customize it, you cannot do that. Uh, However, few LLM providers are giving this option, but again, it's very limited. This is lack of control. So these are the disadvantages of the closed source LLMs, right? So this is the closed source LLMs. Whereas when you come to open source LLMs, it's open architecture. Anyone can download, modify, and run locally in private servers. Advantages, data privacy. So you'll have data privacy because it runs locally. You can fine tune and optimize, and also you can decide, depending upon the use case, you can decide which size I want to go with, whether you want to go with 7 billion parameter or 10 billion parameter, 20 billion parameter, you can decide here, right? Of course, here also we can decide, but again, here depends upon you can also go with a very, very smaller model here. And disadvantages is, of course, you have to have a huge hardware requirement. You should have set up in your GPU, and of course, you need a technical expertise to set up this hardware and everything. So hardware requirement, you need a sample, right? I just told you approximately, for examples. So again, this is a raw model for 7 billion parameter. How much GB of RAM you need, and how much memory you need for each. And obviously, popular open source LLMs are this like Llamas, Mistral, Falcon, Pi, Gemma, all the different open source models you can see and you can look into, and what are the different variants they're offering. Correct. So this is regarding our open source LLMs. And finally, the summarization of comparison is you can see depending upon your use case. For example, if you're worried about data privacy, you can just go with open source. Ease of use, closed source is better. Customization, again, closed source, sorry, open source is better. For customization, model control, open source is better. Hardware needs, closed source is better. Cost, again, depends upon how do you use it. Okay, so like this, these are the various things. Simple refreshment of how you can, what is LLMs and how to work with LLMs. So this is a mind map, guys, generated by AI. So you can see how good it is. So this is a simple, introduction to LLMs and how on types of LLMs. Apart from this closed source LLMs and open source LLMs, I guess you know about this. That is, there are also types of LLMs which generates audio, image, and video. We'll talk about that later because LLMs are not like just right now just generating text, right? LLMs can generate image right now given a prompt, or it can generate audio as well. It can generate video as well. We'll talk about this later, and eventually when we are working with different use cases, we'll be working on that. But I hope you understood the basic idea of LLMs. So in the next video, we'll start working on a use case. We'll do a first initial setup of the environment and we'll start working on a use case. Will be not use case, but we'll start with working with closed source LLMs first. We'll just explore how to use OpenAI, how to use Claude, and how to use Gemini, and then we'll be working on the even use cases eventually. Yeah. So I hope you got the understanding. Thank you for saying up here, guys. Let's meet in the next video. Thank you.